Good day. My name is Michelle. I'm a student at Indiana State University through the distance learning program working on my Bachelor's of Science in Nursing degree. This presentation is on behalf of the Community Health Nursing class. Today I'll be speaking with you about colorectal cancer and the prevention and screening. So let's define colorectal cancer a little bit. First of all, it's the third most common diagnosed cancer in both men and women in the United States. It is a cancerous tumor that develops in either the colon or the rectum, and both of these are parts of the large intestine. Both types can spread to other parts of the body, which is why it is so important to be aware of your risk factors, when screenings are recommended, and how to prevent your overall risk. The learning objectives of this presentation is that by the end of the video, the viewer will be able to 1. Identify modifiable risk factors that put persons in higher risk categories for developing colorectal cancer. 2. Be able to name types of tests used for screening for colorectal cancer. 3. Identify common causes of colorectal cancer. And 4. List symptoms found, if any, in persons requiring further evaluation by their primary healthcare provider. At this time, I recommend that you take a moment and pause the video and participate in the short pretest that is listed in the description of the video to see what it is that you already understand about colorectal cancer. Now, colorectal cancer develops in one of two ways. First, the person may have a polyp that they don't know about that goes untreated and eventually becomes malignant. Finding polyps doesn't necessarily mean the person has colorectal cancer. It just means that they are at risk of developing it and need to be watched more closely. Now, the other type is through gene mutation, and this is oftentimes through family history, where there's some problem in their genetic makeup that allows abnormal cells to develop and grow. And these oftentimes spread outside of the colon and sometimes can be a little quicker to develop. There's two categories of risk factors. There's non-modifiable, which we'll talk about now, and modifiable that we'll discuss in the next slide. Non-modifiable meaning these are things that are inherent to you and you can't change no matter what you do or say. Things that we're born with. Now, one of them is age. One of the highest age categories for risk is between the ages of 50 and 75. Your ethnicity. Statistically, African Americans, Alaskan Natives, and Asian Americans have the highest categories of diagnosed colon cancer. Family history, which no one can do anything about. And in this regard, it just means that we need to watch you at an earlier age. It usually depends on the age that the family member that was diagnosed first, as far as when you were diagnosed or started screening. So oftentimes they'll recommend 5 years prior to the year of the age the person in your family was diagnosed. There's also people with specific chronic conditions that warrant screening a little more closely, and those are with people with diabetes and certain types of inflammatory bowel disorders such as Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Modifiable risk factors, meaning the types that you can do something about to lower your risk, is watching your diet. They find that people that eat a lot of red meat, such as beef, pork, liver, and lamb, processed meats such as hot dogs, sausages, and meatloaves, and foods low in fiber are all contributors to risk factors to those that have developed colon cancer in the past. Also, people with an increased risk are those that are sedentary or inactive, so their activity level can increase their risk. And those that aren't currently at a healthy weight oftentimes have a higher risk factor. So those that can get their weight to a healthy level and maintain it have the ability to lower their risk factors. Screening and prevention recommendations. Now, the current recommendation of starting screening is age 45. This is a newer recommendation, and you can talk to your healthcare provider about whether it's appropriate to start at age 45 or if you have low enough risk factors to wait until age 50, which is the previous recommendation. Now, frequency really does depend on the type of screening you and your healthcare provider decide on. They can be done anywhere from once a year or to every 5 to 10 years. It really depends on what test you do and what your risk factors are. Regardless of the type of test, regardless of the frequency, any abnormal results indicate a need for additional testing and or more frequent screening. Abnormal does not necessarily mean cancer. It means we need to do additional investigation on what's going on. For prevention, following a healthy diet, a moderate activity level, achieving and maintaining a healthy weight can all go in your favor to reduce your risk. And routine screening stops around age 76, but it also depends on your underlying health. And currently, the American Cancer Association and the Centers for Disease Control recommend no longer screening after the age of 85. The most common types of screening tests used are through the lab, via blood tests or stool testing, or actual direct visualization through endoscopy. The most common stool test done is a fecal immunochemical test, where you are given a kit from the lab. You take it home, you collect your stool sample, you return it to the lab, and they test it. The downside of this one is it does have to be done every year. The upside is that you don't have to do any special diet or bowel prep prior to performing the test. The blood tests that they can do to check are often related to checking for any acute blood loss and anemia. They can do certain tests called a CEA to check cancer markers, but they're not always highly reliable. And sometimes there's electrolyte imbalances that can indicate need for further investigation too. And those are usually used to determine what kind of other screening tests they should do, or if they have an abnormal that they're trying to see if have caused other problems. The direct visualization type of tests are the flex sigmoidoscopy, where they only go to the point of the first bend of the colon past the left lower side of your abdomen. It's very limited, and it has to be repeated every 5 to 10 years. The colonoscopy, where it does a direct visualization of the entire large intestine and can remove polyps if found, only has to be repeated every 10 years so long as they don't find anything. Oftentimes, more often, if the test reveals polyps and or if those polyps have been abnormal. You might wonder, what should I plan on asking my healthcare providers when you go into an appointment to determine if you're appropriate to start screening? Here's a list of sample questions that you can take to your appointment to give you an idea of what you should be asking, but by all means, these are not inclusive and they're not necessarily appropriate for every individual. But it's an example of things that you might want to know. And I'll leave that for you to read on your own. Some additional resources for those who want more education on the matter are American Cancer Society, and their website's listed, the National Cancer Institute, and the Centers for Disease Control. These oftentimes will have a list of education on prevention as well as for those who have been diagnosed, and my references for where I got my information. So please be aware of your risk factors. Get your screening when it's indicated, and don't be afraid to talk to your healthcare provider if you have any questions. I thank you for your time and listening.